Before the mind awakens, before the veil thins, reality appears fixed, unchangeable, immovable, bound by invisible chains. But once you hear what is spoken here, the latticework of your old existence begins to dissolve, not slowly, not gently, but with the unmistakable velocity of truth remembered. This is banned knowledge, whispered only in forgotten temples and carried in the breath of ancient mystics who understood that reality is not endured, it is authored. And when you hear these words, truly hear them, your old life cannot continue. It collapses under the weight of remembrance as a shadow disappears when the sun rises, because you are not who you think you are. Your struggles, your limitations, your fears, these were never your identity. They were artifacts of a version of you that no longer survives contact with this deeper truth. You stand now at the threshold of a new timeline, one that has waited lifetimes for your arrival. What follows is not motivation, not philosophy, not spiritual comfort, but activation, a return to the primordial awareness that bends reality, shapes outcomes, and reconfigures destiny from the inside out. Listen closely. Your transformation has already begun. Chapter 1. The Moment the Mirror Shatters. In a quiet town nestled between ancient hills and whispering forests, there lived a man named Rowan, whose life had long been stitched together by predictability. His days unfolded with clockwork precision: wake, work, eat, sleep, each moment echoing the dull rhythm of a life lived entirely within the boundaries of what he had been taught to believe was possible. And though he never voiced it aloud, Rowan carried a heaviness in his chest, a subtle ache he had learned to ignore. It was the ache of a truth unrecognized, a spirit suffocating beneath layers of unconscious agreement. One morning, as he stood before his old bedroom mirror, the world shifted. There was nothing unusual about that day. The sun rose in its customary hush. The air smelled faintly of rain. Yet Rowan sensed a subtle charge in the atmosphere, like a violin string drawn taut before a performance. He leaned toward the mirror, half expecting the same expressionless face that had greeted him for years. But this time, something was different. Something was watching him from the other side. It wasn't a ghost or a shadow. It wasn't even a presence he could name. Rather, it was a sense, a piercing awareness that the reflection staring back at him was not just a reflection. It was a role, a mask, a construct made of assumptions, fears, memories, and beliefs he never consciously chose. And then, as though reality itself could no longer hold its facade, a thin crack splintered down the center of the mirror. Rowan stumbled backward, heart racing. The fracture spread in delicate lines across the glass like frost blooming on a winter window. Yet instead of distorting his reflection, the cracks revealed something hidden beneath the surface. Light, subtle, iridescent, shimmering like breath, crystallizing in moonlight. He reached forward instinctively, fingertips brushing the fractured glass. A single truth struck him with the force of a lightning bolt. This life you have lived is not your real life. It is the echo of an outdated identity. The mirror did not break out of misfortune. It broke out of mercy. For years, Rowan had believed that life happened to him, that circumstances were immovable, that his personality was fixed, that destiny was a rigid path carved in stone long before he walked it. But the moment the mirror shattered, he felt the old story collapse. His reflection rearranged itself, not in form, but in meaning. He saw the subtle deception he had accepted without question, that he was limited by the version of himself he had mistakenly taken to be the truth. He pressed his palm to the glass, and in that instant, a flood of memory, not personal memory, but ancient memory, washed through him. He remembered something his mind had long forgotten, that identity is not discovered, but generated. That reality does not mirror your circumstances, but your state of being. That the self you believe you are is a costume woven from belief systems adopted unconsciously throughout life. The mirror crackled softly, its fragments pulsing with a strange, gentle glow, as if responding to his awakening. A voice, not external, but arising from the depths of his awareness, whispered, "When the reflection breaks, the truth begins." As Rowan gazed into the fractured mirror, he realized his old self had been built from fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping into the vast unknown of his true potential. Each shard reflected a different version of him, each one hinting at the infinite identities he could choose. The life he had been living was only one of countless possibilities, all awaiting his recognition. This was the moment the mirror shattered, not an ending, but an invitation. Rowan felt his chest expand with an unfamiliar sensation. Freedom. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of remembering. He understood intuitively that his old reality, built upon unquestioned beliefs and inherited limitations, could not withstand the presence of this truth. It was already crumbling, already dissolving, already giving way to a life aligned with his deeper essence. He closed his eyes and felt something release within him, a tightness around his heart, a tension in his thoughts, a grip he didn't know he was holding. And as that release washed through him, the room seemed to bend, the air shimmering as though responding to his shift in awareness. For reality does not change slowly. It does not negotiate. It collapses instantly when the self that created it dissolves. The cracks in the mirror were the cracks in Rowan's old world. The moment of shattering was the moment of awakening. The life he had known was already over. The world outside his window looked the same, yet he sensed its structure reorganizing in response to his new frequency. Possibilities once locked away now stirred like birds waking at dawn. Doors that had been invisible now glimmered at the edge of perception. Rowan took one final look at the mirror. It no longer reflected who he had been. It reflected who he was becoming, and he understood the truth that would ripple through the rest of his life. Reality does not change when you fight it. Reality changes when your identity shifts. The mirror shattered so the old consciousness could fall away. What rises now is the self that was waiting beneath the surface all along. Chapter 2. The Law Beneath All Other Laws. Before the first stories of creation were spoken, before symbols found shape in clay or ink, before civilizations carved their myths into stone, there existed a foundational truth known only to the earliest consciousness keepers. Reality obeys your inner recognition, not your desires, not your rituals, not your actions, but the quiet, unquestioned assumption of what you believe yourself to be. This is the law beneath all laws, the engine of manifestation, the pulse of creation, the core around which all other metaphysical teachings orbit. It is the principle so powerful, so destabilizing to ordinary perception, that most humans live entire lifetimes without consciously touching it. Yet once remembered, it becomes impossible to forget. A young woman named Celine learned this truth in a moment that unraveled her entire existence. Celine had always believed life required constant struggle. She worked tirelessly, labored endlessly, and pushed herself through exhaustion in pursuit of goals that seemed forever out of reach. Despite her efforts, success eluded her like a shadow fleeing the morning sun. One night, overwhelmed by frustration, she fled the confines of her small apartment and wandered aimlessly until the city thinned and silence became her companion. She found herself on a dimly lit path beside a still lake, its surface reflecting the moon like a polished mirror. Drawn by some unseen force, Selina knelt by the water's edge, her breath uneven, her heart heavy. As she stared into the lake, she expected to see the weary reflection she had grown accustomed to, the woman burdened by expectation, worn down by effort. But instead, the water shimmered, revealing something else entirely. Her reflection changed, not physically, but energetically. The woman in the water looked serene, sovereign, radiant with a quiet authority Selina had never recognized in herself. It was not an altered version of her. It was the truth beneath the layers she had mistaken for identity. As she gazed into the water's shifting surface, a revelation echoed through her consciousness. The universe answers not who you pretend to be, but who you believe yourself to be. This understanding struck Celine with breathtaking clarity. For years, she had attempted to manifest abundance while identifying herself as someone who lacked. She had sought love while believing herself unworthy. She had fought for respect while carrying an identity shaped by invisibility. Her entire life had been built upon a contradiction, a surface desire clashing with a deeper self-concept. No matter how loudly her thoughts pleaded, her energy whispered a different truth. And the universe listens only to the whisper. The law beneath all other laws is this: your reality reflects the frequency of your self-recognition, not your ambitions, and not your affirmations, not your visualizations, but the core identity you accept without question. Selene watched the reflection in the water shift again, revealing versions of herself she had never imagined: confident, joyful, powerful, abundant, deeply loved, infinitely capable. Each image carried a different vibrational signature, each one representing a timeline she could inhabit if she dared to recognize it as true. The lake whispered through ripples of light. Choose the self that reality must obey. Selene realized then that she had never been denied anything by the universe. Reality had simply been mirroring the version of herself she had unconsciously embodied. The universe was not ignoring her desires. It was honoring her identity. This law operates regardless of belief or awareness. It is the hidden architecture beneath every manifestation principle ever taught. It is the force that shapes synchronicity, magnetizes opportunities, orchestrates outcomes, and molds the fabric of experience. Selene felt a shift deep within her, a rearrangement of assumptions she had long mistaken as truth. She realized her life had not been shaped by fate or external conditions, but by the silent expectations she carried in her heart. She had been living from a story that no longer served her, a narrative inherited from childhood, society, and fear. But identity is not destiny. Identity is selection. She stood slowly, feeling the ground beneath her feet vibrate with newfound clarity. The night air around her seemed alive, responsive, as though reality itself awaited her next breath. Selene closed her eyes and allowed a new recognition to rise within her. Not forced, not wished for, but accepted. I am the one who life rises to meet. With that single acknowledgement, a wave of energy cascaded through her body. Her old assumptions dissolved like sand slipping through open fingers. She felt herself crossing an invisible threshold, the line between the person she had been and the consciousness she was becoming. In that moment, Selene understood the law beneath all laws. Change your self-recognition, and reality reorganizes itself with breathtaking speed. The water stilled, the moon brightened, a new timeline unfurled before her. Her old life could not survive this realization. A new self had awakened, and reality was already beginning to reshape around her. Chapter 3. When Identity Becomes Vapor. In the dusky hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath between dreaming and waking, there lived a woman named Leora who believed she knew exactly who she was. Her identity had been carefully shaped over years of repetition, shaped by compliments she accepted too eagerly, criticisms she held too closely, and expectations she wore like chains disguised as jewelry. She could list her traits as if reading a script: introverted, cautious, responsible, self-sacrificing, predictable. These words formed the scaffolding of a persona she had never questioned. She thought these characteristics were carved in stone, as permanent as her shadow. But the universe has a way of dissolving what no longer serves you, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. For Leora, it began with a peculiar experience. One evening, she wandered into an antique shop she had walked past 100 times but never entered. Something, call it intuition, curiosity, or destiny, pulled her inside. The air smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Shelves were lined with relics that hummed with the weight of countless stories. Yet one object drew her like a magnet, an old wooden frame with no glass and no picture inside. It leaned unassumingly against a shelf, but the space within the frame shimmered subtly, as if inviting her to look closer. She lifted it gently. And in that empty space where an image should have been, something utterly impossible occurred. She saw herself, not her face, not her body, but her identity, as if her personality had taken form, hovering like a ghostly silhouette within the frame. The image flickered like mist disturbed by wind. It wasn't solid, it wasn't stable. It was vapor, shifting, swirling, dissolving and reforming every few seconds. Leora watched with widening eyes as traits she had accepted for years flickered into being and then evaporated. Responsible, timid, cautious, anxious, predictable. Each word manifested in luminous script, then melted like fog touched by sunlight. In their place emerged new words she had never allowed herself to claim. Powerful, magnetic, unbound, infinite, creator. The frame pulsed with a silent intelligence, and a whisper, soft but unmistakably real, rose from the space between worlds. Identity is vapor. You are the one who gives it shape. Leora felt the words resonate deep in her chest, vibrating through her bones. Her breath caught as she realized the truth unfolding before her. She had spent her life assuming her identity was a fixed structure, something inherited, shaped by past experiences, and cemented by repetition. But the frame revealed what mystics have known since ancient times. Identity is a choice, not a fact. A self-image is nothing more than a temporary configuration of belief and emotion. It shifts when you shift. It collapses when you withdraw belief from it. It reforms when you cast your awareness in a new direction. Leora felt her whole world tilt as the vaporous identity within the frame dissolved entirely, leaving only luminous emptiness. A blank canvas, pure potential. She whispered into the silence, "Then who am I?" The frame shimmered. "Who do you choose to be?" It was the simplest and most terrifying question she had ever encountered. If her identity was not fixed, then all the limitations she had accepted were self-imposed illusions. All the traits she believed defined her were merely patterns she had rehearsed into existence. She realized she had been living in a small room with the door unlocked the entire time. Her heart pounded as she recognized the profound implication. The moment you stop believing in the identity that confines you, it dissolves, like vapor touched by heat, like mist meeting dawn. Leora felt an internal shift, subtle yet seismic. She sensed the persona she had worn for decades loosening, drifting like smoke. She had always thought she needed to improve herself, to fix her flaws, to heal her wounds before she could become someone new. But now she understood. She didn't need to change who she was. She needed to stop identifying with who she was not. In a flash of clarity, she saw how identity shapes reality. Every belief about oneself emits a frequency, and reality mirrors that frequency without judgment or hesitation. Life reflects who you are being, not who you wish you could be. As this truth sank into her awareness, the shop around her seemed to shift. Colors brightened. The air grew lighter. It felt as though she stood not in a dusty room but at the threshold of infinite possibilities. The frame vibrated softly, then dimmed, returning to its ordinary wooden form. But Leora was not the same. She felt spacious inside, as if walls had fallen away. She sensed her old self dissolving, its edges softening, its limitations melting into something formless and free. She stepped out of the shop with a different posture, a different breath, a different awareness. Her reality had not changed yet, but she had, and reality would soon follow. As she walked beneath the streetlights, a quiet realization settled within her. When you stop insisting on who you've been, you make space for who you truly are. Identity is vapor. You are the breath that shapes it. And the moment you recognize this, your old reality begins to collapse. Chapter 4. The energetic flavor of truth. In the heart of a sprawling city where noise never sleeps and ambition clings to the air like static, lived a man named Ezra. To those who knew him, he was ordinary, another face in the crowd, another dreamer navigating the maze of life. But beneath his quiet demeanor simmered a restlessness he could not explain. Ezra felt haunted by a strange sensation he experienced only in rare moments when the world seemed to pause and a sense of deep, indescribable knowing washed over him. These moments carried a distinct energetic flavor, warm, electric, undeniable. A resonance that vibrated through his body like a tuning fork struck by invisible hands. But these moments never lingered. They flickered and vanished, leaving him yearning for something he could not name. One evening, after a long day filled with empty tasks and hollow conversations, Ezra wandered into the city's botanical observatory. It was near closing, but the guard, lost in a book, barely noticed him slip inside. The conservatory was quiet, illuminated by soft lanterns that cast golden patterns across towering leaves and delicate blossoms. Ezra walked deeper until he reached a secluded section where a single plant stood within a glass enclosure. Its petals glowed faintly, as though lit from within, and beside it sat a small plaque. "The Whispering Lotus blooms only in the presence of truth." Ezra chuckled softly, a poetic marketing trick, he assumed, but something in the air shifted. As he stepped closer, the room temperature seemed to rise, a gentle warmth washing over him. The lotus shimmered. For a moment, Ezra thought it might simply be reflecting the lantern light, but then it pulsed, once, twice, like a beating heart. He froze, a memory stirred within him, those rare flashes of knowing he had felt throughout his life. The same energy, the same resonance, warm, electric, unmistakably alive. The lotus responded to something. But what? His breath trembled as he whispered, barely audible, "What are you showing me?" Without warning, a wave of clarity surged through him. Thoughts he had never considered illuminated his mind like constellations forming from darkness. He understood in an instant that truth carries a distinct energetic signature, a frequency that the body recognizes long before the mind does. Truth is not an idea, truth is a resonance. Ezra suddenly remembered every time he had sensed it. The warmth in his chest when he considered a dream he had abandoned. The tingling in his fingertips when he imagined taking a risk he never allowed himself to pursue. The strange magnetism he felt toward choices he deemed irrational but deeply aligned. The electric clarity that struck him in moments of stillness, whispering that life could be radically different. These were not coincidences or fantasies. They were truth-knocking. The lotus pulsed brighter, as though affirming his realization. Ezra sank onto the stone bench beside the enclosure, overwhelmed by a sensation that felt like both remembering and revelation. The universe communicates not through logic, but through frequency. Truth vibrates, it warms, it expands, and because it is aligned with your highest timeline, your body responds instinctively. He saw now why his life had felt so hollow. He had been living according to ideas, not resonance, thoughts, not truth, logic, not alignment. He had ignored every whisper of his deeper knowing because it didn't fit the narrative he had been taught to follow. He had traded the electric clarity of truth for the numb predictability of convention. But truth is patient. It waits. And the moment he stepped near the Whispering Lotus, truth recognized itself within him. Ezra understood something profound. The moment you recognize truth, reality begins to reorganize around it. Not gradually, not someday, but instantly. Because truth carries a frequency that dissolves illusions on contact. Just as light dissolves darkness, truth dissolves limitation. He watched as the lotus glowed with increasing brilliance, petals unfurling in slow, deliberate motion. It was responding to him, not to his words, not to his thoughts, but to the frequency he had stepped into the moment he acknowledged what he had always known. Ezra placed his palm gently against the glass. A surge of warmth radiated into his hand, traveling up his arm, across his chest, and into the core of his being. In that moment, he felt his old life tremble. His job that drained him, his relationships that stifled him, his dreams he had shelved, his identity he had outgrown, all of it felt like a fading echo. Because once truth enters your awareness with clarity, the old reality cannot hold. It collapses, not as punishment, but as liberation. Ezra stood slowly, breath unsteady, but spirit anchored in newfound certainty. He felt expanded, aligned, awakened to a resonance he could no longer deny. As he walked out of the observatory, lantern light glinting across the glass dome, he realized, truth does not ask for belief, it only asks to be recognized. And once it is, life begins to transform with a speed that defies explanation. Ezra stepped into the night with a new knowing. When you follow the energetic flavor of truth, your old life dissolves, and the new one unfolds with exquisite precision. Chapter 5. The Collapse Timeline. In a remote village nestled beneath towering cliffs, where dawn spilled gold across ancient stone, there lived a scholar named Thalen. He was known for his meticulous nature, his devotion to study, and his unwavering belief in cause and effect. To Thalen, life was a sequence of predictable steps. Every outcome required a logical chain, every result a measurable cause. Reality, he believed, was a stable mechanism, unchanging, reliable, consistent. But this belief was destined to fracture. For years, Thalen documented the habits of village life with obsessive dedication. He tracked seasons with mathematical precision, recorded the behavior of birds, mapped the shadows cast by the moon, and charted every event with the confidence of a man who believed he understood reality's rhythm. Yet, beneath his quiet certainty pulsed an unspoken fear that life might not be as predictable as he wanted it to be. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thalen walked home through a forest glowing with fireflies. He carried his journal tucked under his arm, filled with neat rows of observations. But as he passed through a clearing, a sudden shimmering ripple moved through the air, like heat rising from stone, yet there was no heat. The leaves shimmered, the fireflies froze mid-air. Then the world shifted, not violently, not loudly, but with a subtle, profound rearrangement, like the universe inhaling, recalibrating, and exhaling again. Thalen blinked. The trees around him had subtly changed shape. The path beneath him had moved several paces to the right. The air felt denser, charged, as if filled with invisible sparks. He stumbled backward, heart pounding. "Impossible," he whispered. Yet the impossibility persisted. The fireflies resumed their dance as if nothing had happened, but Thalen stood in a forest that was and wasn't the forest he knew. The difference was subtle, yet undeniable. Reality had shifted, and the shift had occurred without any physical cause. As he clutched his journal tighter, an overwhelming truth began to rise within him, one he had never dared to consider. Reality does not change slowly. It changes instantly when the consciousness producing it shifts. The collapse timeline is not gradual. It is immediate, and he had just stepped into one. Thalen hurried home, mind racing. He lit a lantern, slammed his journal open, and began scribbling feverishly. Yet the more he wrote, the more he realized logic alone could not explain what he experienced. He remembered how, moments before the shift, he had been thinking of his life, how trapped he felt, how stagnant, how desperately he longed for change, but believed change required time, effort, struggle, progression. But the longing hadn't been intellectual. It had been a silent, visceral surrender, a moment of utter emotional release. He remembered whispering, "I'm done with this life," with a sincerity that pierced through his beliefs. The shift happened immediately after. He closed his journal slowly, breath trembling. The truth revealed itself. When identity shifts, the timeline supporting the old identity collapses. Reality reorganizes around the new identity instantly. But humans mistake emotional release for a momentary feeling when in fact it is the trigger, the energetic detonator of a new reality. He had not caused the shift with thought. He had caused it with identity. As Thalen sat in dim lantern light, he felt something unravel within him, a belief he had carried since childhood, that change required time, that transformation was linear, that the universe moved slowly. But the universe is not slow. Human attachment is slow. The moment attachment to an identity dissolves, the reality tethered to it collapses like dry leaves crushed beneath a single footstep. A memory surfaced, of a story the elders once whispered about travelers who crossed mountain passes only to find their village transformed beyond recognition, though only hours had passed. People had dismissed these tales as myth. Now Thalen understood. They were not myths, they were collapses, transitions between timelines triggered by shifts in consciousness. The collapse timeline is activated when an old identity loses its emotional charge, when belief crumbles, when the ego's grip fails, when truth is recognized, even silently. Thalen extinguished the lantern and walked to his window. The stars above seemed closer, brighter, vibrating with an intensity he had never noticed. But perhaps they had always vibrated like this. Perhaps it was his perception of reality that had changed. He felt the weight of a profound revelation settle into his bones. The universe does not adjust gradually to your new sense of self. It conforms instantly. It is only your awareness that catches up slowly. Over the next days, Thalen observed the shift unfolding with increasing clarity. Old patterns dissolved effortlessly. People treated him differently without knowing why. Opportunities emerged as if waiting behind an invisible door that had just opened. His old reality, his old timeline, was not fading. It had already collapsed. He was simply stepping into the next chapter of a story he didn't know he was writing. The collapsed timeline is not a transition, it is a replacement. Reality switches tracks the instant you do. And Thalen, once a scholar of predictable worlds, became a witness to the mystical truth. Change is instantaneous. Only resistance makes it seem slow. He could never return to who he had been. The universe doesn't allow it. Once a timeline collapses, it collapses forever. Chapter 6. The Field That Rearranges Everything. In a vast desert where golden dunes stretched endlessly toward the horizon, there was said to be a shrine known only to a few, a sanctuary of silence, hidden by the shifting sands. Legends whispered that those who found it did not seek it intentionally. Rather, the shrine revealed itself only to those standing on the brink of transformation. Amira was one such soul. She had spent her life in turmoil, battling circumstances that felt immovable, suffering hardships she believed were woven into her fate. No matter how hard she tried to change her life, she felt trapped by an invisible barrier, as if reality itself resisted her efforts. One night, after yet another disappointment, Amira left her village and wandered into the desert alone. She walked for hours beneath the vast expanse of stars until exhaustion overtook her. As she collapsed to her knees, tears darkening the sand, she whispered the words that would alter her destiny forever. "I cannot live like this anymore. Show me what I cannot see." The wind stirred. The dunes shifted, and when Amira lifted her head, she found herself standing before the ancient shrine. Its pillars glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, etched with symbols that pulsed like living veins of light. The air around it vibrated with a presence, a hum that resonated deep within her bones. She stepped inside, drawn by a force older than time. At the center of the shrine stood a stone basin filled not with water, but with something luminous, an ethereal field of swirling light, shimmering like liquid starlight. It moved as though it were alive, as though it recognized her. A voice, not external but arising from the depths of her awareness, spoke, "This is the field, the blueprint beneath all creation, the weaver of worlds, the echo of your being." Amira trembled, unable to speak. The field pulsed, sending gentle ripples of light across the chamber. "Reality does not respond to thought alone," the voice continued. "It responds to your energetic identity, to the frequency you inhabit, to the truth you embody." As she watched the swirling light, memories flooded her. Moments of hope drowned by fear, dreams abandoned because she believed she was unworthy, desires dismissed because she thought she needed permission to pursue them. The field mirrored it all, every fear, every belief, every unspoken expectation. The field was not judging her, it was reflecting her, she understood then. Reality had never opposed her. The field had only responded faithfully to the frequency she emitted. "You do not change your life," the voice whispered. "You change the field through your state of being." This truth struck Amira with the force of revelation. The field is not altered by effort, not by force, and not by desperation or wishing or grasping. It shifts only when you shift. She reached her hand toward the basin, fingers trembling. As her fingertips touched the glowing surface, the field rippled outward like a living mirror. Images rose within its luminous depths, versions of herself she had never met. Amira radiant with confidence. Amira living in abundance. Amira loved deeply. Amira walking paths she once believed were beyond her reach. Each reflection carried a different frequency, a different timeline, a different destiny. She realized she was not looking at fantasies, but possibilities, each one as real as her current life, waiting only for her alignment. "Choose," the voice urged. "Which version of yourself do you wish the field to echo?" Her heart thundered. She had spent years trying to change her circumstances, not understanding that circumstances are the last layer to shift. The field is the first, the invisible blueprint beneath matter. Amira closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She allowed herself to feel a new identity, not through thought, but through embodiment. She felt worthy, she felt abundant, she felt powerful, she felt free. As this emotional resonance expanded through her being, the field responded instantly. Its light shifted, rearranging itself in elegant, flowing geometry. The entire chamber pulsed with a frequency that matched the new state she had stepped into. Reality was already reorganizing. She opened her eyes. The shrine was dissolving. The desert was dissolving. The world around her bent and shimmered like heat rising from sand. When the vibration settled, Amira found herself standing at the edge of her village. But everything felt different. The air, the light, the path beneath her feet, each carried a subtle newness. Because she had changed, and the field had responded. Over the next weeks, everything in Amira's life transformed with uncanny ease. Opportunities appeared without effort. Relationships healed or fell away with graceful precision. Resources flowed toward her like water seeking its natural course. She understood now. You don't force reality to change. You shift your internal frequency, and the field rearranges everything around you. It was never the world that needed to change. It was her identity, her energetic stance within the field. Amira whispered a final prayer beneath the rising sun. I am no longer bound by the world I once knew. I walk now in the field that reflects who I choose to be. And the field, faithful as ever, responded, so it is. Chapter 7. The Forbidden Shift, Identity Before Evidence. Deep within a mountain cloaked in mist and ancient legends, there existed a monastery few had ever seen, carved into stone, hidden from the eyes of the world, protected by the silence of centuries. It was said that only those who stood on the edge of becoming, those whose souls trembled with readiness, found their way there. One such traveler was a young man named Iran. Iran had spent years chasing transformation. He devoured teachings, experimented with rituals, practiced affirmations until his voice grew hoarse. Yet nothing in his life truly changed. His dreams remained stubbornly distant, like constellations mocking him from unreachable heights. His heart ached with longing for a life he could feel but not touch. One cold morning, after a night spent wandering the forest in frustration, Iran stumbled upon a steep stone passageway that had not been there before. Compelled by a force deeper than curiosity, he followed the path upward until he reached a wooden door carved with a symbol of an eye encircled by flame. He knocked once. The door opened. Inside, torches flickered along the walls, illuminating a simple room where an elderly monk sat cross-legged on a woven mat. His eyes sparkled with a clarity that pierced through shadows. He motioned for Iran to sit. Without introduction, the monk spoke. You seek change without becoming the one who already has it. Iran blinked. I don't understand. The monk smiled gently, as though he had heard the same words from thousands across time. You believe evidence creates identity, but the universe does not work that way. Identity creates evidence. Iran shook his head. But how can I believe I am something I have never seen? The monk reached behind him and lifted a golden bowl. He placed it between them. Look into the bowl. Iran peered into its polished surface. To his shock, he did not see his own face. He saw another version of himself, radiant, powerful, confident, wealthy beyond measure. A version of himself who had already achieved the life he desired. The reflection was impossibly vivid, as if drawn from another reality entirely. He gasped and pulled back. What is this? The monk folded his hands calmly. This is the truth you refuse to accept. Your future self already exists, but you cannot meet him while clinging to who you have been. Iran reached toward the bowl again, mesmerized by the reflection of the man he longed to become. How do I become him? The monk answered without hesitation. By embodying him before you see any evidence. This is the forbidden shift, the shift most fear. Iran felt something tremble inside him, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and recognition. For years he had waited for circumstances to validate his dreams. He had waited for proof before allowing himself to feel worthy, confident, successful. The monk extended a hand over the bowl. Identity precedes manifestation. You do not receive the life you want. You receive the life that matches who you are being. A torch flickered behind them, its flame elongating as if pulled by an invisible current. Most people live backwards, the monk continued. They wait for evidence to change their identity. But the universe does not respond to waiting. It responds to being. Iran's heart pounded. The truth vibrated through him like a chord struck on a cosmic instrument. The monk then leaned closer. Tell me, Iran, how would you walk if you already lived the life you desire? Iran hesitated, confidently. Then stand as that man. Iran stood. For the first time in his life, he didn't stand as the Iran shaped by past failures, fears, or doubts. He stood as the version he had seen in the golden bowl, a being whose presence commanded the room, whose spirit radiated certainty. His posture changed, his breath deepened, his energy expanded. The room responded. The torches grew brighter, the air warmer. Reality shifted around him, not because he forced it, but because his identity had changed. The monk's voice grew soft, almost reverent. You have just done what most never dare. You shifted identity without evidence. Now evidence must follow. Iran felt the truth settle into his bones like ancient fire. For the first time, he understood manifestation not as a technique, but as a remembrance, a homecoming, a merging with what already exists in the quantum field. The monk spoke once more. The moment you embody the identity of your future self, the old timeline collapses. The universe reorganizes. Your new life begins. Instantly. Iran bowed deeply, gratitude flooding him. As he left the monastery, the golden bowl's reflection embedded itself in his memory, not as fantasy, but as recognition. He walked down the mountain path with a new stride, not as the man he had been, but as the one he chose to be. Identity first, evidence second. This is the forbidden shift, the doorway through which all true manifestation flows. Chapter 8. The frequency of the unrecognizable life. In the heart of a valley blanketed with morning mist, there lived a woman named Solara who carried a secret longing inside her chest, like a small bird desperate for sky. She dreamed of a life so vibrant, so expansive, so radically different from her current existence that she barely dared speak of it. Her days were predictable, simple work, modest home, quiet routines, but her nights were filled with visions of something else entirely, luxurious landscapes, extraordinary experiences, and a version of herself so luminous she feared her own imagination. She believed these dreams were fantasies. But they weren't. They were memories of a frequency she had not yet chosen. Everything began to change on the morning she met the stranger. She found him sitting on a rock overlooking a river, his face serene, his posture effortless, as though he belonged not to the world, but to the timeless space behind it. His eyes held a depth she could not comprehend, ancient, knowing, bright with a kind of truth she felt rather than understood. He spoke without turning to her. You wish for a life you cannot recognize because you have not yet recognized yourself. Solara froze. How do you know that? The stranger finally looked at her, and she felt as though her entire being was being seen, truly seen for the first time. Because the life you seek is not separate from you. It exists on a frequency you have not yet embodied. Solara sat down beside him, compelled by something deeper than curiosity. What do you mean by frequency? The stranger picked up a small stone and tossed it gently into the river. Rings of water expanded outward in perfect symmetry. Every reality radiates a frequency. Every identity emits a vibration. Every version of you lives on its own energetic wavelength. He pointed to the ripples in the water. Your desired life exists as surely as these ripples, but you cannot experience it while vibrating at the frequency of your current self. Solara stared at the ripples, mesmerized. So how do I reach the frequency of the life I want? The stranger smiled softly. You don't reach it, you become it. A hush fell over the valley as though nature itself leaned in to listen. Most people attempt to change their life with thought and action, but the unrecognizable life, The extraordinary life requires a different path. An emotional shift so profound it alters your entire energetic signature. Solara's breath hitched. She could feel the truth vibrating in the air. The stranger continued, "Your dream life feels unrecognizable because the version of you who lives it is unrecognizable to your current identity." He looked directly into her eyes. "You cannot think your way into that life. You must feel your way into it." Solara swallowed hard. "How?" The stranger closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. "Feel now what the future you feels, not the circumstances, but the emotional frequency those circumstances produce." Solara hesitated, but then she tried. She imagined herself living the life she dreamed of, not as a distant fantasy, but as an embodied now. She imagined the freedom, the expansion, the joy, the power. She let those emotions move into her body. Her chest lifted, her breath deepened, her energy widened. The stranger nodded. "Yes, that frequency. Hold it." The air around them shimmered. The valley brightened. Something invisible shifted. Solara felt an indescribable sensation, as if her soul stepped forward while her old self stepped back. She opened her eyes. The world looked the same, yet everything felt different. Reality pulsed with possibility. The river sparkled with an intensity she had never seen. Her skin tingled with aliveness. The stranger spoke gently, reverently. "This is how reality changes. Not when circumstances shift, but when you shift into the frequency of the version of you who already lives the life you desire." Solara realized she had been doing it backwards her entire life. She had waited for her life to change so she could feel different. But the universe was waiting for her to feel different so her life could change. The stranger rose to his feet. "Walk as the one who already lives the life you long for. Feel as she feels, think as she thinks, move as she moves. And reality will reorganize itself to match you." Solara felt tears gather in her eyes, not of sadness but of recognition. She understood now. The unrecognizable life becomes recognizable. The moment you embody the frequency of the self who already lives it. When she looked up again, the stranger had vanished. But the frequency remained. It pulsed in her chest like a second heartbeat. It hummed in her bones like ancient remembering. It guided her like an inner compass pointing toward a destiny she had denied for too long. Solara stood tall, inhaled deeply, and stepped into a new life. Not through effort, but through frequency. Chapter 9. The Myth of Effort. In a bustling port city where merchants shouted their prices into the salty morning air and ships creaked against their ropes like restless beasts, there lived a man named Corin who believed in effort above all else. He rose before dawn each day, pushing his body to exhaustion and his mind to the brink of collapse, convinced that success belonged only to those who struggled hardest. Corin's hands were calloused, his back bent, his face etched with weariness. Yet for all his toil, his life remained painfully stagnant. Nothing shifted, nothing grew, nothing responded to his relentless effort. The harder he worked, the more stuck he became. He thought this was fate, but fate had nothing to do with it. One evening, after hauling crates along the harbor until his muscles trembled, Corin sat at the end of a wooden pier, staring out at the sea. The sunset painted the horizon in hues of amber and rose, but Corin saw only the growing weight of another day wasted. He whispered to the waves, "What more must I do?" The sea responded with a quiet, rhythmic lapping against the shore, as if waiting for a question he hadn't yet asked. Behind him, footsteps approached. An old fisherman with weathered skin and eyes bright as polished coral lowered himself beside Corin. He said nothing for a long time. He simply watched the waves with the patience of someone who understood their language. Finally, he asked, "Do you know why your net comes up empty?" Corin sighed. "Because I don't work hard enough." The fisherman shook his head softly. "No, boy, it's because you keep casting with desperation. The fish do not come to frantic hands." Corin frowned. "But I must work. How else will the universe know I am trying?" The fisherman chuckled, a sound like pebbles rolling in tide. "The universe does not respond to trying," he said. It responds to being. Corin turned to him, confused. The fisherman picked up a stone and flicked it gently across the water. It skipped once, twice, then sank. Effort, the fisherman said, is what you rely on when you have forgotten your nature. Corin narrowed his eyes. And what nature is that? The fisherman looked at him with a depth that made Corin's chest tighten. The nature of a creator, not a laborer. The words hit Corin with unexpected force. The fisherman continued, You believe effort is noble, but it is simply fear wearing a mask. For if you truly trusted your place in this universe, you would act from alignment, not struggle. A breeze stirred across the harbor, cool and fragrant with salt. Corin stared at the rippling water. You speak as if I can simply stop working. The fisherman shook his head again. You misunderstand. Action is natural. Effort is not. The flower grows with movement but not strain. The river flows with momentum but not struggle. He paused, letting the truth settle. Those who are aligned do more with one breath than others do with 10 years of force. Corin felt something shift inside him, small but unmistakable. A crack appeared in the belief he had worshipped all his life. How do I align? He whispered. The fisherman closed his eyes. By becoming the one who no longer depends on effort. Corin swallowed. But who am I without effort? The fisherman smiled. Exactly. That is what you must discover. Corin looked down at his hands, rugged from years of strain. They trembled slightly, not from exhaustion, but from awakening. He realized he had been obsessed with doing in order to compensate for who he believed he was not. He believed he was small, so he worked large. He believed he was unworthy, so he sacrificed endlessly. He believed he was incomplete, so he labored to earn completion. Effort had become his identity, and that identity kept him trapped. A sudden memory flashed through his mind of watching a ship set sail earlier that day. The wind filled its sails effortlessly, lifting the vessel forward with an almost mystical grace. The sailors worked, yes, but they worked with the wind, not against it. Alignment, not effort. The fisherman stood slowly, joints creaking but spirit vibrant. Remember this, Corin, he said. The universe is wind. Your desire is the sail. Your identity is the mast. Align them, and life carries you. Fight them, and you sink. Corin's breath trembled. The fisherman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Stop forcing waves to move. Become the tide instead. And with that, he walked away. Corin remained on the pier long after night folded over the harbor. The lights of distant ships flickered like stars drifting across dark water. The world felt suddenly different, not because anything had changed, but because he had. Effort had once seemed noble. Now it felt like bondage, a cage built from outdated beliefs. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to imagine a different version of himself. One who moved with ease, one who trusted himself, one who acted from alignment rather than desperation. As he felt into this identity, a warmth blossomed in his chest. A tingling sensation spread across his skin. A subtle shift in the air echoed around him. The universe had felt the change. And in that moment, Corin understood the truth whispered by sages across time. Reality does not respond to force. It responds to the frequency you hold when you stop forcing. The myth of effort dissolved, and something new began. Chapter 10. The Reality Selection Mechanism. Far beyond the edge of the mainland, where ocean and sky became a seamless horizon, there existed an island spoken of only in stories, a place where reality itself was said to bend, tilt, and rearrange in ways that defied every known law. This island was called Miralon. Few found it by intention. Most wandered into its domain by accident, or perhaps by inner readiness. For Miralon appeared not on maps, but through consciousness. It showed itself only to those who stood on the precipice of understanding that reality was not a linear prison, but a selection. One such traveler was Naomi. Naomi had never felt at home in her life. No matter where she lived or how she tried to fit in, a persistent inner knowing whispered that she was meant for something else, something deeper, richer, more aligned with her true nature. Her nights were haunted by visions of alternate versions of herself, versions that felt more real than the life she lived by day. Naomi often wondered if these visions were fantasies or memories. The answer awaited her on Miralyn. One morning, while sailing to escape the noise of her responsibilities, Naomi drifted off mid-journey. When she awoke, her boat was gently rocking against a shore she had never seen. The air shimmered with a strange serenity. Trees glowed with soft luminescence. The entire island hummed like a living instrument. She stepped onto the sand, sensing the boundary she had crossed was not merely geographical. The moment her foot touched the ground, the air shifted. A figure emerged from the trees. An old woman with hair like moonlit silver and eyes that looked as if they had seen the beginning of time itself. "You have arrived," the woman said, her voice warm yet carrying the weight of eons. Naomi blinked. "Where am I?" "Between possibilities," the woman replied. "This is Miralyn, the place where reality reveals how it truly works." The woman motioned for Naomi to follow her into a grove where the trees bent inward, forming natural arches of shimmering light. The air was thick with potential, as though every blink reshaped the world. "Tell me, Naomi," the woman asked gently, "do you believe reality is fixed?" Naomi hesitated. "No, but it feels fixed." The woman nodded. "That is because you have been living from the wrong vantage point." She tapped her chest. "You have been choosing reality with your mind instead of your being." Naomi frowned. "I don't understand." The woman raised her hand, and the air before them rippled, forming a veil of shifting images, countless versions of Naomi living countless versions of her life. Some joyous, some sorrowful, some extraordinary, some painfully ordinary. Naomi gasped. "Are these timelines?" the woman said. "Every possible reality your consciousness can align with." Naomi stepped closer, marveling at the visions. One showed her living on a vibrant coastline, surrounded by love. Another revealed her speaking to thousands as a teacher whose words awakened souls. Another showed her wealthy, peaceful, serene. Another showed her lost, small, afraid. "They all exist," Naomi whispered. "Yes," the woman replied. "And you can step into any of them. This is the reality selection mechanism." The images shifted, swirling into a luminous spiral. "Your mind does not choose your reality," the woman explained. "Your frequency does, your identity does, your emotional state does." She looked directly into Naomi's soul. "You visit different timelines each time your state shifts." Naomi swallowed hard. "But why doesn't it feel that way?" The woman smiled. "Because you keep selecting timelines similar to your past. You stay on the same shelf, picking the same book with a different cover." She gestured toward the spiral of realities. Reality selection is not about forcing change. It is about shifting into the state of the version of you who already lives the life you desire. The spiral began to pulse with Naomi's heartbeat, responding to her presence. The woman placed a hand over Naomi's heart. "Feel into the version of yourself who already has what you want." Naomi closed her eyes. She felt a wave of emotion rise within her. Confidence, peace, expansion, alignment. She felt herself becoming that version, not through imagination, but through resonance. When she opened her eyes, the spiral shifted instantly, pulling new timelines into focus. The woman nodded. "You see, selection, not effort, not force, not waiting, selection." Naomi stepped closer to the shifting portal of possibilities. "So, I just choose?" "Yes," the woman said softly. "But not with thought, with identity. You become the version of yourself who lives the timeline you desire, and reality must match you." Naomi felt awe ripple through her. The woman's voice softened further. "Reality is not a river you float down. It is an ocean of possibilities waiting for the frequency you decide to embody." Naomi stared into the cascade of visions, future versions of herself waving to her from across time. It felt like returning home. She inhaled deeply, choosing, not with words, but with her entire being. The world around her shimmered, the island dissolved, and Naomi found herself back on her boat, but everything, every detail of her reality felt subtly new, as though she had stepped into a version of life perfectly aligned with the identity she had just embodied. She smiled, sensing the entire universe rearranging itself around her choice. The reality selection mechanism had activated, and life would never be the same. Chapter 11. The Collapse Switch. In a distant mountain village where clouds drifted low enough to kiss the rooftops and the air shimmered with the quiet magic of old traditions, there lived a woman named Neris. To the villagers, she was known as steady, dependable, and endlessly patient, qualities admired by all, yet admired for the wrong reasons. For beneath her calm exterior lay a soul that had been carrying the weight of an identity she no longer recognized. Neris felt trapped in a life assembled from obligations she never consciously chose. The small home she tended, the people she served, the routines she followed, they all felt like echoes of an old version of herself, a version she had outgrown, yet continued to animate like a ghost that refused to rest. For years, Neris believed that change required discipline, ascetic practice, or divine intervention. She prayed for transformation, tried tirelessly to improve her circumstances, and sought answers from every spiritual text she could find. And yet nothing shifted. Her life remained frozen in place. Until the morning, everything collapsed. It began in the most unassuming moment. Neris stood in her kitchen preparing tea, steam curling upward like the breath of the early dawn. She stared at the rising vapor and suddenly felt the full weight of years of suffocation. Something inside her snapped, not out of despair but out of clarity. A single thought surfaced within her, carrying the force of truth. I am done living this way. Not as complaint, not as plea, but as recognition. It was not a wish for change. It was the realization that she could no longer carry the identity tethered to her old life. The shift was immediate. A sensation washed over her, warm, ripe with an almost electric stillness, as though the entire universe inhaled and held its breath. The kitchen around her blurred for an instant. The steam from the tea froze in mid-air before dissolving into nothingness. The collapse switch had been activated. She didn't know the term, she didn't understand the mechanism, but her soul recognized it. In that single moment of identity release, pure, emotional, unfiltered truth, her old reality began to dissolve. She felt the shift first in her body. A weight lifted from her chest. A tension she had carried for decades uncoiled from her spine. Her breath deepened. Her posture straightened. Her mind grew utterly still. Then the world responded. That morning, every interaction felt strange, subtle but undeniably altered. The neighbor who normally complained about trivial matters greeted her with unexpected kindness. A letter arrived from a distant cousin offering her an opportunity she had never imagined. Even the weather felt different, as though the very air chose to rearrange itself in patterns that matched her internal awakening. The collapse was underway. She walked through the village as if stepping through two overlapping realities, the old one she had inhabited for years and the new one emerging with each breath she took as her identity recalibrated. Identity is not merely who you think you are. Identity is the anchor that stabilizes a timeline. When the anchor lifts, the timeline must collapse. The universe does not debate. It does not negotiate. It responds. Her life, once stagnant, now moved with uncanny fluidity. Conversations unfolded with ease. Doors opened where walls once stood. People who had never noticed her suddenly looked up as she passed, as though sensing a new frequency emanating from her. But the true shift came that evening. As Neris stepped out of her home to gather herbs from her garden, she saw a figure she had never met standing at her gate. A traveling mystic draped in flowing robes, eyes bright with a knowing that made the air around him vibrate. "You've activated the switch," he said before she could speak. Neris blinked. "What switch?" He walked towards her slowly, reverently. "The collapse switch," he repeated. "The moment you released the identity that imprisoned your life, your reality began to unravel. The old timeline is breaking apart." Her breath caught. A shiver passed through her. "But I didn't do anything," she whispered. He smiled gently. "You did the only thing that matters. You stopped pretending you were who you used to be." He motioned toward the sky, where clouds drifted in patterns that looked almost scripted. When a timeline no longer has an identity to sustain it, it collapses. Almost instantly, the events, people, and circumstances tied to that identity dissolve, making space for a new reality to form. Nerys felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the undeniable recognition that her soul had known this truth all along. The mystic stepped closer. "You must understand something crucial," he said softly. "People spend years trying to change their lives with actions, decisions, strategies, but one moment of emotional clarity, one moment of total release does what years of effort cannot." He placed his hand over his heart. The collapse switch is emotional truth, unfiltered, uncompromised, undeniable. Nerys felt a tremor through her body, as though her cells were remembering something ancient. "You have stepped out of your old timeline," he continued. "You no longer match the frequency that created your former life. That is why everything will now change without your effort." He began to walk away, but paused before disappearing into the mist. "One more thing, Nerys. Do not cling to anything that begins to fall away now. The collapse is not loss, it is liberation. Let the old world dismantle itself. Your new life is already forming." And then he was gone. For days after, Nerys watched as remnants of her old existence dissolved with effortless precision. Relationships faded or evolved. Opportunities she had never considered emerged as though summoned by destiny. Burdens she once carried evaporated as if they had never belonged to her. She didn't force anything, she didn't plan anything. She simply surrendered to the collapse, trusting in the intelligence behind it. And she learned the greatest secret of change. Transformation does not come from effort. It comes from the moment you say with full emotional truth, "I will not be this version of myself anymore." That moment is the switch, and once activated, nothing old can survive. The collapse is not destruction, it is recreation, the universe reclaiming what no longer belongs to your becoming. Chapter 12. The Silence That Rewrites Fate. In a hidden monastery perched atop cliffs so high they pierced the clouds, there lived an ancient lineage of monks who guarded a secret few had ever learned: that silence is not emptiness, but power. That stillness does not pause creation, it accelerates it, and that the quiet mind does not escape reality, it rewrites it. A young initiate named Sorin discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. Sorin was restless by nature. While the other monks moved with the calm discipline of seasoned practitioners, Sorin's mind danced like wildfire. He tried to meditate, but his thoughts swirled endlessly. He tried to chant, but his voice wavered. He tried to find inner peace, but his mind fled from stillness like a startled bird. He often wondered if he was meant for this path at all. One evening, after failing yet another meditation session, Sorin stormed out of the hall, frustration burning through him. He climbed the narrow stone steps that led to the monastery's uppermost terrace. There, he collapsed against the cold wall, burying his head in his hands. "I can't do this," he whispered. The wind howled past him, carrying flecks of snow that melted against his skin. The world felt vast and indifferent, a mirror to the chaos within his mind. Then, from the shadows, an elderly monk emerged, Master Aramo, the oldest and most revered teacher in the order. His steps were slow but steady, each one carrying a presence that calmed the very air around him. He sat beside Sorin without speaking. For a long time they simply breathed together in the freezing mountain air. Finally the master asked, "Sorin, what do you believe silence is?" Sorin sighed. "A lack of noise, an absence of thought." Master Aramo shook his head gently. "No, silence is the birthplace of all creation. It is not empty, it is the field from which everything arises." Sorin frowned. "But when I sit in silence, I feel nothing." Aramo's eyes gleamed with ancient knowing. "That is because you keep listening for silence with your mind." He tapped Sorin's chest. "Silence begins here." He motioned for Sorin to follow him. The master led him through a narrow passage until they reached a small chamber carved into the mountain. At the center sat a single bowl filled with water so still it reflected the room like a mirror. "This," Aramo said, "is the Chamber of Echoes. It reveals the truth of one's mind." Sorin knelt before the bowl. "Look." He peered into the water. At first he saw his own reflection, but as he gazed deeper, the water rippled, though he had not touched it, and images began to form within it. Images of his restless thoughts swirling like smoke. Images of memories he clung to. Images of fears he carried from childhood. Each thought created a disturbance in the water, sending ripples outward. "Do you see?" Aramo said. "Your thoughts do not simply occupy your mind. They ripple outward into the field. They shape your reality." Sorin swallowed thickly. "Then how do I stop them?" Aramo smiled. "You don't stop them, you transcend them." He motioned toward the water. "The moment you enter true silence, not forced stillness but surrender, your thoughts dissolve. And when the mind becomes still, your energy becomes clear. And when your energy becomes clear, the field responds instantly." He waved his hand gently over the bowl. The water stilled, perfectly, utterly. The air thickened with a tangible calm. In that stillness, Sorin felt something shift, subtle, profound, like a door opening somewhere inside his chest. It was a sensation he had never felt before, a spaciousness, a vastness, as though the universe leaned closer in the quiet. Aramo whispered, "Sorin, everything you wish to manifest is already formed, but your noise has been blocking the doorway." He placed his hand on Sorin's back. "When you enter silence, fate rewrites itself to match your true frequency." Sorin closed his eyes. He breathed. For the first time in his life, he did not try to silence his mind. He simply sat. He surrendered. He allowed, and something miraculous occurred. One by one, thoughts drifted past without hooking into him. The noise softened. The energy stilled. And Sorin entered a silence so deep it vibrated. In that silence, he felt the faint hum of the universe, gentle yet powerful, like the heartbeat of all existence. He sensed timelines shifting, reality reorganizing, the field aligning itself to his quietest truth. Tears streamed down his face. He understood. Silence did not empty him. Silence revealed him. Master Aramo spoke softly. "This is where creation begins. Not in effort, not in wanting, but in the silent space before thought, where your soul speaks directly to the universe." Sorin opened his eyes. The water in the bowl reflected not chaos, but crystalline stillness. Master Aramo nodded. "From this day forward your fate will shift, not because you fight for it, but because you have entered the dimension where the universe listens." As they left the chamber, Sorin felt lighter, clearer, more connected than he had ever been. His steps carried a newfound grace. His breath synced with the mountain air. His mind no longer scattered, it flowed. He realized then that silence was not a void. It was the womb of creation, and those who know how to enter it hold the power to rewrite fate itself. Chapter 13. The Law of Energetic Irreversibility. At the edge of a vast forest where ancient trees whispered secrets carried from century to century, there lived a man named Oron. He was a seeker, gentle in nature, devoted to spiritual learning, yet plagued by a haunting pattern. Every time he progressed, he inevitably fell back into the same old life. He would shift his mindset, feel filled with hope, awaken to new possibilities, only for the change to slip through his fingers days later. His growth felt like a tide that rose only to recede, leaving him stranded in familiar sand. Oron believed this was failure, but the universe had other plans. One morning, after another cycle of awakening followed by collapse, Oron retreated deep into the forest. He wandered aimlessly until he reached a clearing he had never seen before, a place untouched by time, where the air shimmered like a hidden realm pulsing just beneath the visible world. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous stone arch covered in glowing symbols. Oron felt drawn to it, as if the arch knew him, recognized him, had been waiting for him. As he approached, a faint hum vibrated through the ground, rising through his feet and settling into his spine. Then, softly, a voice echoed through the clearing, not external, but resonating from within the arch, within the air, within Oron himself. "You have entered the threshold of irreversibility." Oron's breath stilled. What does that mean? the voice answered gently. It means you are ready to understand why change slips away from those who do not yet grasp the law. Symbols along the arch illuminated, casting golden light across the clearing. You believe growth is fragile, that transformation is unstable, that the old life can reclaim you. This is an illusion. Oren frowned. But I always fall back. The voice seemed to wrap around him like warm wind. You fall back only because your identity remains tethered to the past. But once identity shifts completely, once your being adopts a new frequency, the transformation becomes irreversible. Oren searched his mind for understanding. How do I make change last? How do I stop cycles from repeating? The arch pulsed, and suddenly the air before him rippled, revealing images, versions of himself walking through his life like echoes. Oren the pleaser, Oren the doubter, Oren the struggler, Oren the invisible, Oren the afraid. Each version was tethered to thick cords of energy that flowed into the ground, anchoring them to old timelines. He watched as these cords glowed with the frequency of his past beliefs, fear, unworthiness, self-denial. Then a new version of Oren appeared, radiant, free, sovereign. The cords binding him were cut. He stood unanchored, unbound, untethered. The voice whispered, irreversibility occurs the moment the old self loses all emotional charge. Oren froze. Emotional charge, the quiet force that had held him captive for years, the guilt, the obligation, the fear, the shame, the identity of the struggler. These emotions had anchored him to his old timeline. The arch revealed new images, timelines branching out like rivers, some vibrant, some dim. You may step into a new timeline with intention, the voice said, but you stay there only when the emotions of your old identity no longer fuel the past. Oren nodded slowly. So I collapse the old timeline by removing energy from it? The arch glowed brightly. Yes, where energy withdraws, reality dissolves. When the emotional resonance of your past identity fades, the past itself cannot hold you. Oren sat on the moss-covered ground, chest rising and falling with new understanding. He whispered, then transformation isn't fragile. It collapses only when I continue feeding the old identity. The voice answered softly. Exactly. Once you shift your inner truth, the universe cannot return you to who you were. This is the law of energetic irreversibility. To demonstrate, the arch vibrated gently, then projected a scene. A phoenix rising from ash. But the ashes did not cling, they could not. The phoenix was no longer a creature bound to the ground. It had become something else entirely. The voice spoke again. Nothing can return to what it was after becoming what it truly is. Oren felt something fall away inside him, as though an invisible cord snapped. The belief that he could regress, become small again, fall into old patterns again, collapsed. He stood, feeling a clarity bloom in his chest. Then my change becomes permanent, he whispered, when I embody the new identity, not just observe it. Yes, the arch replied. Identity is the key. Energy follows identity. Reality follows energy. And once the identity is rewritten, the universe must obey. The wind rustled through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and ancient magic. Oren stepped closer to the arch, feeling energy move through him in waves. He felt the truth settle into his bones. Your old reality cannot reclaim you. Once you stop being the person who belonged to it. He touched the arch. Light cascaded around him. And in that instant, a shift occurred, deep, permanent, irreversible. He was no longer tethered to the version of himself shaped by fear. He had stepped into a self the past could not reach. When he returned to the village, people swore something was different about him. His eyes clearer, his posture taller, his presence quieter, yet more powerful. But it wasn't what people saw. It was what they felt. He had crossed the threshold of irreversibility, and life would never return to its former shape. Because once the emotional threads tying you to an old identity dissolve, the past loses all power. The law is simple, unbreakable, eternal. When the energy of who you were runs out, who you were can never return. Chapter 14. The Power of Non-Resistance. High in the eastern mountains, where the air thinned into a crystalline clarity and clouds drifted beneath one's feet, there lived a woman named Kayla, a warrior, a strategist, a pillar of strength in her village. For years, Kayla believed that resistance was noble, that pushing harder was the mark of the strong, and that life yielded only to those who fought fiercely for their desires. But strength, when misunderstood, becomes a trap. Kayla fought with life the way she fought in battle, constantly pushing, resisting, protecting, bracing. She strained for abundance. She forced relationships. She battled circumstances. She wrestled with fate itself, convinced the universe admired her resilience. But each victory was hollow, each gain slipped away, each effort left her more exhausted and further from what she sought. Then came the night everything unraveled. Kayla was returning from a diplomatic mission when a violent storm tore through the mountain pass. Her horse panicked, slipped, and both of them tumbled down a steep incline. Kayla survived, but her leg was injured, and her body badly bruised. She dragged herself to shelter in a shallow cave, shivering as thunder roared across the sky. She cursed the storm, cursed fate, cursed her helplessness. "Why do you resist everything?" a voice echoed from the darkness. Kayla froze. She scanned the cave, breath trembling. From the shadows emerged an elderly woman draped in robes the color of twilight, deep indigo, shimmering subtly with silver threads. Kayla stiffened. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer. Her presence was impossibly calm, as if she were untouched by the storm raging outside. "Someone who knows the cost of fighting life," she answered softly. Kayla grit her teeth. "I survived because I fought." The woman shook her head gently. "No, you survived because life has patience with those who struggle, but you do not thrive because you know only how to resist." Kayla scowled. "Resistance is strength." "No," the woman replied. "Resistance is fear." Lightning illuminated the cave, briefly revealing the woman's ancient eyes, filled with galaxies of understanding. Kayla opened her mouth to argue, but the woman raised her hand. "You have exhausted yourself trying to force life into submission. But life is not won through battle. Life unfolds when you stop pushing against what already wants to move." Kayla felt heat rise to her cheeks. "So I'm supposed to surrender? Do nothing?" The woman smiled. "Non-resistance is not doing nothing. It is ceasing to oppose what is already aligned for you." The storm outside softened slightly, as though listening. The woman sat beside Kayla and placed a warm hand over her heart. "Every desire has a natural path, a pathway of least resistance. You lose your way only when you push against the current." Kayla looked away, swallowing the knot in her throat. The woman continued. "You have believed that being strong means holding tension, but true strength lies in allowing." She gestured toward the storm. "Look at the wind. Does it struggle to move the clouds? Look at the river. Does it force its way through stone? No, it finds the opening. It flows." Kayla felt a strange sensation bloom within her, an uncomfortable recognition. She whispered, "But how do I stop resisting? It feels automatic." The woman nodded. "Resistance is the ego's armor, and the ego fears losing control." She paused, letting the truth settle. "But control is an illusion. Flow is reality." She lifted Kayla's chin gently. "When you let go of resistance, life begins to move in ways you could never orchestrate. Doors open, paths reveal themselves, opportunities rise like dawn." Kayla shook her head, tears brimming. "I don't know how to let go." The woman placed her forehead against Kayla's. "Then try this." "Stop trying." Kayla exhaled sharply. "What?" "Stop trying to change what you cannot control. Stop trying to force outcomes. Stop trying to be strong when your soul longs to soften. Stop trying to figure everything out." Her voice became a whisper woven with power. "Just allow." Those two words reverberated through Kayla's bones. Just allow. A wave of warmth spread through her chest, dissolving a tension she hadn't realized she carried. For the first time in years, she felt the softening of her spirit, like armor melting, like breath expanding. The storm outside began to calm. The woman stood gracefully. "One last truth," she said. "When you stop resisting, your desire does not disappear. It arrives. Kayla felt her injuries ease, not miraculously, but meaningfully, as though her body responded to this new state. The woman stepped into the shadows, her outline dissolving like mist. Kayla called out, "Will I see you again?" The woman's voice echoed faintly. "You will see me in every moment you choose flow over force." When the storm finally passed, Kayla limped out of the cave, but her spirit was transformed. She felt lighter, clearer, more connected to the quiet intelligence of the universe. She returned to her village, not as a warrior defined by resistance, but as a master of flow, one who aligned with life rather than battling it. From that day on, everything changed. Opportunities appeared without force, relationships deepened without tension, abundance flowed without struggle. She realized the power she had been seeking was not found in pushing harder, but in allowing the current of life to guide her. The truth became her new creed: resistance is the anchor of the old self. Non-resistance is the doorway to miracles. Let go and let life arrive. Chapter 15. The Alchemy of Contrast. In a small valley village surrounded by rolling hills and fields of saffron gold, there lived a woman named Mira, whose heart felt perpetually bruised by life's disappointments. Wherever she turned, she met resistance. Whenever she reached for a dream, it crumbled like sand. Every desire seemed to drift further the moment she dared to move toward it. She often wondered if she was cursed, or forgotten, or simply unlucky. She couldn't understand why life kept placing obstacles in her path. Each setback felt personal, each hardship a reminder that her dreams were perhaps meant for others, but not for her. But the universe had not abandoned Mira. It was preparing her. One late afternoon, after yet another door slammed shut in her face, Mira wandered aimlessly until she found herself standing at the edge of the ancient stone bridge that crossed the river dividing her village from the forest beyond. She leaned against the railing, tears falling into the water below. "Why does life keep denying me?" she whispered. The river did not answer, yet its flow shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to see an elderly traveler draped in a cloak the color of twilight. His eyes sparkled as if reflecting countless lifetimes of understanding. He carried no pack, wore no shoes, and seemed untouched by the dust of the road. He bowed slightly. "You stand at the threshold of the greatest teaching," he said, "yet you believe yourself defeated." Mira wiped her tears. "I have failed again and again. I do not understand why my heart's desires never come to me." The traveler smiled softly. "Then it is time you learn the alchemy of contrast." He joined her at the railing, gazing serenely at the river. "When you encounter what you do not want," he said, "life is not rejecting you, it is refining you." Mira frowned. "Refining?" The traveler nodded. "Contrast is the sculptor of destiny. Without it, your desires remain vague, unfocused, and incomplete. Each disappointment chisels away ambiguity. Each setback clarifies your true path." He gestured toward the river. "Look there." The water flows toward the ocean, but it does not flow in a perfect line. It curves, swirls, detours. Each obstruction sharpens its direction. So too does contrast shape your becoming. Mira watched the water tumble over rocks, noticing how obstacles didn't stop its flow. They guided it. The traveler raised his hand, and the air shimmered like heat rising from stone. Before Mira's eyes, a vision unfolded. A sculptor standing before a massive block of marble. He struck it again and again, not to destroy it, but to reveal the figure hidden within. Each strike removed what did not belong. Each blow clarified what was meant to emerge. The traveler's voice echoed through the vision. "You believe the universe is striking you, but the universe is striking the marble around you. It is revealing the masterpiece beneath." The vision dissolved. Mira felt her breath catch. "So my setbacks have purpose?" "Oh yes," the traveler said. "Contrast births clarity. Clarity births alignment, and alignment births manifestation." He turned to her with eyes like starlight. "You think hardship slows your progress, but it is hardship that makes progress possible." Mira's heart fluttered with both confusion and recognition. the traveler continued. There is a truth you must understand if you wish to walk into the life waiting for you. Opposition reveals desire. Desire reveals direction. Direction reveals destiny. He lifted his hand again, and a second vision appeared. Mira herself, but in a different timeline. Radiant, confident, joyful. She was surrounded by abundance, living her deepest dreams. But this version of her was standing on a path illuminated by thousands of glowing stones. Each stone represented a moment of contrast in her life, moments she had labeled as failures. Yet in the vision, she saw that each stone had guided her toward the version of herself she was meant to become. Her hardships had not been obstacles, they had been coordinates. The vision faded. Mira felt tears stream down her face, not of sorrow, but of profound understanding. Then every time life pushed me away, it was pushing you toward yourself, the traveler finished. He placed a hand over her heart. Contrast is the universe saying, look more closely. You are meant for something more precise, more aligned, more true. He stepped back. Mira, your life has not fallen apart. It has been falling into place, piece by piece, layer by layer, truth by truth. He bowed deeply. You have not been denied. You have been defined. And with that, he walked across the bridge, disappearing into the forest as though he were made of mist. Mira remained at the railing long after he vanished. The river no longer felt indifferent. It felt instructive, alive, like a companion guiding her. She understood at last. Contrast is not cruelty. Contrast is calibration. Contrast is cosmic precision. The universe sculpting you into the one who can receive what you've asked for. And she whispered to the sky, thank you for what I did not want, because it has led me to what I do. Chapter 16. Becoming the field, not the person. In a solitary temple perched atop a plateau where lightning often danced across the clouds like celestial brushstrokes, there lived a sage named Aureus. People traveled from distant lands seeking his wisdom, for he was said to possess an ability few could fathom. He did not manifest reality, he became it. Aureus lived in a state of profound serenity. Seasons shifted around him, yet he remained untouched by fear, worry, or desire. It was rumored that storms parted at his approach, animals bowed in his presence, and reality rearranged itself to match his inner state. One day, a young woman named Liane climbed the treacherous path to the temple. She had heard tales of Aureus from wandering mystics who claimed he held the secret to total transformation. When she reached the temple gates, exhausted, trembling, drenched in sweat, Aureus was already waiting for her, seated in meditation beneath a lone cedar tree. Without opening his eyes, he said, "You seek to shape reality, but reality is shaped by those who stop trying." Liane collapsed to her knees. "Master, I've tried everything. Affirmations, intention, visualization. Nothing changes." Aureus opened his eyes, revealing a gaze so calm it seemed to still the air. "That is because you have been trying as a person, but manifestation does not occur from the level of personality." He stood and motioned for her to follow him. "Come, you must see something." He led her to the back of the temple, where a vast, shimmering field stretched across the plateau. It glowed faintly, like a tapestry woven from stardust. "What is this?" Liane whispered. Aureus smiled. "This is the field, but it is not external. It is who you truly are." Liane frowned. "I don't understand." Aureus gestured toward the shimmering expanse. "Every thought, every emotion, every belief you hold feeds into the field. The field is not separate from you. It is the extension of your consciousness, the blueprint from which your reality is woven." He stepped forward, and as his foot touched the field, ripples of light spread outward, bending the environment gently, as though reality itself acknowledged him. "When you try to manifest as a person," he said, "you are like a wave trying to change the ocean." Liane swallowed. "Then, how do I manifest?" Aureus turned to her. "By becoming the ocean." He extended his arm, and the field pulsed in response. "You must stop identifying as the individual trying to influence reality. You must identify as the consciousness that reality reflects." Liane felt the truth reverberate through her. But how do I become the field? Aureus walked deeper into the shimmering expanse, and the field moved with him like water around a fish. By dissolving the illusion of separateness, by recognizing that your desires do not come from your mind, they come from the field seeking expression through you. He reached down and lifted a handful of glowing soil. "Feel this," he said. She cupped her hands. The soil pulsed with warmth, light, and infinite potential. "This is you," he said. "Not the body, not the thoughts, not the fears. This." Suddenly the field expanded, enveloping Liane in a sphere of shimmering light. She gasped as she felt her entire being loosen, like the boundaries of her identity were dissolving. She felt expansive, spacious, infinite, complete. Thoughts dissolved, fear evaporated, identity softened. She felt herself not as a person, but as presence. Aureus's voice echoed through the light. "When you think as a person, you manifest slowly. When you feel as the field, reality shifts instantly. When you become the field, you no longer manifest. You express." Liane felt her awareness expand so far that the edges of her mind dissolved into the horizon. She realized something profound. The field does not respond to force, it responds to identity. If she identified as limited, the field reflected limitation. If she identified as infinite, the field reflected infinity. She could feel timelines, possibilities, and potentials swirling around her, responding to the frequency she emitted, not through thought, but through state. Aureus spoke again. "You have lived as the wave. Live now as the ocean." The shimmering field vibrated in resonance. Then, slowly, gently, the light around her began to recede. She found herself standing beside Aureus again, tears streaming down her face. "Master," she whispered, "I felt everything and nothing at once." He nodded. "You became the field." She wiped her tears. "How do I hold that state?" Aureus placed a hand over her heart. "By remembering, not learning. Remembering that you are not a person trying to manifest. You are consciousness experiencing itself through a person." His voice grew soft. "When you identify as the field, your desires no longer feel like longing. They feel like inevitabilities." Liane felt a quiet power rise within her, deeper than anything she had ever known. Aureus smiled. "You will no longer chase reality. Reality will follow you." And as the sun set beyond the plateau, staining the sky in hues of rose and gold, Liane whispered the truth her soul had finally remembered. "I am not separate from creation. I am the field through which creation flows." Chapter 17. Energetic Command versus Human Effort. In a city of shimmering towers and endless motion, where ambition pulsed like electricity through crowded streets, lived a man named Jalen. He was admired for his work ethic, praised for his discipline, envied for his perseverance. But admiration is not the same as alignment, and effort is not the same as power. Jalen had built his entire life on the foundation of relentless striving. From dawn until long past dusk, he pushed himself farther than any reasonable person ever would. His co-workers spoke of him as a machine, a marvel, a force of nature, but privately, Jalen felt like he was drowning. Despite all of his effort, despite the hours he sacrificed, the sweat he poured, the battles he fought, his life remained eerily unchanged. Success slipped from his grasp like water through clenched fists. Opportunities seemed to hover just beyond reach. Abundance approached, flirted, then vanished like a ghost. And the more he pushed, the more life resisted. He had no idea why. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Jalen found himself wandering the city with no destination in mind. His feet led him to a part of town he rarely visited, quiet, old, untouched by the city's relentless pursuit of progress. There, nestled between two forgotten buildings, was a small tea house glowing with warm lantern light. At the entrance, a wooden sign read, "Effort tires the body. Command moves the universe." Jalen frowned, confused, yet intrigued. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and ancient wood. A single figure sat at a low table, an elderly man with silver hair tied in a loose knot, his presence calm and unassuming, yet carrying an unmistakable power. Without looking up, the man said, "Sit." Jalen obeyed, though he didn't know why. The man poured tea into a small cup and slid it across the table. "You work too hard," he said simply. Jalen bristled. "Hard work is the only way to succeed." The man chuckled. "If that were true, the world would look very different." Jalen frowned. "Then what determines success?" The man lifted his cup slowly, reverently. "The universe does not respond to effort," he said. "It responds to frequency." He set the cup down gently. "Human effort comes from fear. Energetic command comes from alignment." Jalen leaned forward, captured by the gravity in the man's voice. "What do you mean by command?" The man tapped Jalen's chest. "Your energy speaks louder than your actions. The universe listens not to what you do, but to what you are." He gestured around the quiet room. "You can push at reality with all your might, and it will not move if your energy contradicts your desire. But speak with the resonance of certainty, and reality rearranges itself to your tone." Jalen blinked, unsettled. "How do I speak with command?" The man smiled. "By becoming the version of yourself who no longer doubts." He leaned back. "Effort is the language of those who believe they must earn what they want. Command is the language of those who understand they are the source." Jalen's breath caught. His chest tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. "You're saying I've been operating from lack?" "Yes," the man said. "Your effort is not driven by power, it is driven by fear. Fear of failure. Fear of not being enough. Fear of missing opportunities." He poured more tea. "When you act from fear, you broadcast a frequency of resistance. The universe mirrors that resistance back to you." Jalen's throat felt dry. "So what do I do instead?" The man's eyes glowed with a soft, knowing light. "You align, you command, you embody." He raised a finger. "Not through action first, through energy first." He lifted a small pebble from the table and placed it in his palm. "Watch." The pebble rose into the air slowly, effortlessly. Jalen gasped. The man released a soft laugh. "This is not magic. It is coherence. My energy does not ask the pebble to rise. My energy expects it." The pebble gently lowered back to his palm. "When you live in the frequency of the outcome, effort becomes irrelevant." Jalen stared in awe. "How do I learn this?" The man leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "You stop pushing and you stop forcing and you stop chasing." He tapped Jalen's forehead. "You silence the mind that screams for control." Then he tapped Jalen's heart. "And you tune into the part of you that already knows the outcome is yours." Jalen felt a heat bloom in his chest, a resonance he had never felt before. The man continued, "Every desire you have exists already, but you cannot receive it while vibrating at the frequency of wanting. Wanting is separation, command is unity." Jalen inhaled sharply. "Then how do I command?" The old man smiled gently. "By no longer questioning whether you can have what you want, and instead asking yourself who you are when you already have it." The world around Jalen seemed to shift. The tea house glowed more brightly. The air vibrated with new possibility. The man stood. "You are not meant to push the world, you are meant to move it." As Jalen stepped back into the night, he felt something rewire inside him. A quiet power replacing the frantic noise of effort. No pushing, no forcing, no scrambling, and only alignment, only certainty, only command. And from that night onward, the world responded differently. Not to his effort, but to his energy. Because once a person stops operating from fear and begins speaking with the frequency of truth, the universe must obey. Energetic command is not asking. It is recognition, not striving, but remembering. And Jalen understood at last, effort alters little. Energy alters everything. Chapter 18. Relationships as Resonance. In the bustling heart of a sunlit marketplace, where voices mingled with the aroma of spices and fresh bread, lived a man named Dalon who spent his life searching for true love. He longed for a bond filled with depth, connection, and understanding, a relationship that nourished the soul rather than drained it. Yet every relationship Dalon entered fell apart in the same way. Partners grew distant, affection faded, Arguments erupted from nothing. Passion transformed into confusion and hurt. Again and again he found himself abandoned, not by chance but by pattern. And each time he asked the same question. Why do I attract the same type of person? One morning, after yet another heartbreak left him restless and hollow, Dalen visited the old seer who lived near the edge of the marketplace. She was known for speaking truths people were afraid to hear, and Dalen had reached a point where he craved truth more than comfort. The seer, a woman with braids threaded in silver and eyes sharp as moonlight, invited him inside without a word. He spoke his frustrations. How is it that I try so hard, yet love always escapes me? The seer listened quietly, then asked him to sit before a large bronze bowl filled with still water. Look, she commanded. Dalen leaned over the bowl, but instead of his reflection, he saw a swirling mist of images, versions of himself in past relationships. He watched arguments, misunderstandings, and quiet resentment. He saw how he dimmed his own light to keep others comfortable. He saw how he clung to people out of fear, not love. He saw himself choosing relationships that matched his hidden wounds. Confusion twisted his brow. Why am I seeing this? The seer placed her hand on his shoulder. Because relationships do not reflect what you want, they reflect what you are. Dalen stared at her. What I am. Your state of being, she said. Your frequency. Your resonance. She pointed at the water. You do not attract partners by desire. You attract them by vibration. Dalen felt his breath falter. What does that mean? The seer reached into the bowl of water. The surface shivered, and a new vision appeared. It showed Dalen as a child, quiet, overlooked, yearning for warmth he rarely received. He learned young to earn love rather than expect it, to settle rather than express, to prove his worth rather than live it. These wounds, the seer said gently, created your resonance. She snapped her fingers, and the vision shifted again, now showing Dalen's past partners. Each one matched a frequency of his hidden beliefs. Those who took him for granted matched his belief that he wasn't enough. Those who left abruptly matched his fear of abandonment. Those who belittled him matched his buried self-doubt. The seer's voice grew softer. You thought these people came to teach you lessons, but they came because your resonance called them. Dalen felt tears gather in his eyes. So, my relationships have been mirrors? Exactly, she said. Resonance seeks resonance. A tuning fork vibrates only when struck by another that matches its frequency. She lifted her finger. 2 tuning forks appeared on either side of the bowl. She struck one. The other began to hum instantly, even though it had not been touched. This is resonance. This is how relationships work. Dalen stared, mesmerized. You want a love who sees your light, she continued, but you vibrate at the frequency of abandonment. You yearn to be cherished, but you emanate self-distrust. You desire connection, but your energy whispers loneliness. Dalen felt the truth hit him like a wave. So what do I do? He asked quietly. The seer leaned closer, eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. You must become the resonance of the love you desire. She waved her hand over the bowl. The water became still once more. First, you must see yourself as worthy, not someday, but now. Second, you must stop abandoning your own needs. Third, you must embody the frequency of the love you seek, not by searching outward, but by radiating inward. She tapped his chest. Love does not come to you. It comes through you. Dalen closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He imagined himself as the man he wanted to be in love, open, trusting, grounded, cherished, self-honoring. He felt warmth bloom in his chest, a new frequency, tender but strong. The water in the bowl shimmered. Good, the seer whispered. You are shifting. When Dalen opened his eyes, the tuning forks beside the bowl were vibrating, both of them, without being touched. He stared, stunned. You see? The seer said softly. When your frequency changes, so does the entire field around you. When you embody the resonance of love, love must find you. Dalen rose to his feet, feeling a presence in his chest that hadn't been there before, an alignment he had never known. As he left the seer's house, the world felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. And the truth echoed through him like a song he had always known. You do not attract what you desire. You attract what you resonate. Change your resonance and your relationships will transform into reflections of your highest self. That evening, as the marketplace glowed under lantern light, Dalen walked with a new certainty. He was no longer searching for love. He was becoming it. Chapter 19. The dimmer switch of belief. In a quiet coastal town where dawn unfurled like a golden scroll across the sea each morning, there lived a baker named Elian. His pastries were delicate works of art, his breads renowned throughout the village, yet something in him remained painfully unresolved. To the townsfolk, Elian appeared content, simple life, steady work, small joys. But beneath the flour-dusted apron and practiced smile lived a man haunted by flickering belief. Some mornings he woke with unshakable conviction. I am capable of greatness. Other mornings he felt small, insignificant, and destined for mediocrity. This inconsistency rippled through every part of his life. The bakery would flourish on days he felt certain, customers lining the street in eager anticipation. But on days when doubt dimmed his spirit, business slowed inexplicably, almost as if the universe responded directly to the brightness of his belief. Elian could not understand why his life felt so unstable, why progress came in waves instead of steady flow. Until he met the woman encircled in starlight. One night, after closing the bakery, Elian wandered to the edge of the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Moonlight shimmered across the waves like liquid silver. The wind carried the faint scent of distant rain. He whispered into the dark, "Why can't I stay confident? Why does belief come and go like a fickle flame?" A soft voice answered, "Because you have been adjusting your belief like a dimmer switch, never fully on, never fully off." Elian spun around, startled. Standing behind him was a woman cloaked in deep midnight blue, her eyes illuminated like stars trapped beneath water. She wore no shoes, carried no lantern, yet glowed with an otherworldly radiance. "Who are you?" Elian whispered. "A keeper of luminous truths," she said gently. "And tonight, I come to show you the mechanics of belief." She motioned for him to follow her to a circle of stones arranged at the cliff's edge. When she stepped inside the circle, the stones pulsed with faint light. "Sit," she instructed. Elian obeyed, heart pounding with curiosity. She raised her palm, and the air above the stones shimmered, forming a floating lantern that flickered erratically, bright one moment, dim the next. "This," she said, "is your belief." Elian frowned. "Why does it keep changing?" "Because you keep changing your identity," she replied. "Belief is not held by the mind. Belief is held by the self, and your self-image is flickering." She gestured at the lantern. "You turn your belief up when circumstances look promising, and turn it down when they do not." The lantern obeyed her words, brightening, dimming. But the universe does not respond to a belief that flickers. It responds to a belief that holds. Elian swallowed. "How do I stop flickering?" The woman knelt before the lantern. "You must understand what belief truly is." She tapped the lantern's base. Belief is not a thought. Belief is not hope. Belief is not a desire. Belief is the energetic decision that something is already true. She snapped her fingers. The lantern shone with steady brilliance, warm, unmoving. When belief becomes a state rather than a thought, it no longer flickers. Elian leaned forward. "But how do I reach that state?" The woman's eyes softened. "By removing the conditions you have placed on your belief." Elian's brows furrowed. "Conditions?" "Yes," she said. "You believe when you see progress. You believe when people praise you. You believe when things feel easy." She raised her hand sharply. The lantern sputtered and dimmed. "But belief that depends on evidence is not belief. It is reaction." She stepped closer to him. "True belief does not wait for signs. It creates them." The words struck Elian like a bolt of clarity. He thought of all the days when his bakery thrived, Those were the days he believed without hesitation. The universe had not blessed him randomly. It had simply reflected the steadiness of his internal light.
"What happens," Elian whispered, "when belief becomes unwavering?"
The woman smiled, and a gust of wind spiraled through the circle of stones. "The universe reorganizes instantly," she said, "like moths gathering around a flame that does not falter." She waved her hand over the lantern. Suddenly, the space around them filled with vibrant scenes, visions of Elian's life in multiple timelines. Elian, successful beyond imagination. Elian known across the coast for his artistry. Elian teaching apprentices. Elian owning a flourishing chain of bakeries. Elian living with joy, abundance, and effortless knowing. Elian gasped.
"These are possible futures."
She nodded. "They all already exist, but you cannot access the brightest one with a flickering belief." The lantern pulsed. "You must choose a state," she said softly, "and stay there long enough for reality to crystallize around it." Elian felt tears rising, not of sadness but recognition. He whispered, "I want to believe fully, not sometimes, but always." The woman cupped her hands around the lantern. "Then decide," she said, "not with your mind but with your being." Elian closed his eyes. And in that moment, he made a quiet, powerful decision, not fueled by hope or desperation, but by identity. When he opened his eyes, the lantern blazed with steady brilliance. The woman nodded approvingly. "You have just turned the switch fully on." She stepped back into the shadows. "When you stop dimming your belief, life brightens to match you." The wind carried her final words as she disappeared. Be unwavering, and the universe becomes undeniable. For the first time in his life, Elian walked home not with hope, but with knowing. And from that day forward, nothing remained the same. Chapter 20. The Spacious Now. In a busy marketplace where time seemed to race forward with the pulse of 1,000 footsteps, lived a man named Harin. He was always ahead of himself, always planning, always anticipating, always rushing toward a future that never seemed to arrive. Harin measured his life in tomorrows. Tomorrow he would start living mindfully. Tomorrow he would pursue his dreams. Tomorrow he would feel fulfilled. But tomorrow never came. Tomorrow stayed tomorrow. And the present moment, rich, powerful, fertile, remained invisible to him. Harin believed he was being productive, yet he was never present. He longed for joy, yet he postponed it endlessly. He wanted transformation, but he waited for the right moment. And because he was never here, he was never able to shift his reality. One evening, after losing a lucrative opportunity because of his distractibility, Harin wandered into a quiet alley where time seemed to slow down. There he encountered a man dressed in flowing robes the color of twilight dusk, not quite blue, not quite purple, shimmering with a stillness Harin had never felt. The man observed Harin with kind eyes. "You move quickly," he said, "but you never arrive." Harin frowned. "I'm working toward my future. That's where my life will be." The man stepped closer. "No," he said gently. "Your life is here, and you are missing it." He guided Harin to a small courtyard hidden behind the alley. At its center sat a circular pool, still as glass. Lanterns overhead reflected in the water with perfect symmetry. The man gestured toward the pool. "Look." Harin gazed into the water. The reflection shifted, showing him scenes of his life. Harin, rushing through breakfast, mind on the next task. Harin, ignoring a child's laughter because he was late. Harin, brushing aside an idea that could change everything because he was too busy. Harin, imagining his future, never feeling his present. The man's voice resonated. "You live in a narrow corridor between past and future, never fully in either, and never fully here." Harin's chest tightened. "But the present feels too small. Nothing important happens here." The man knelt beside the pool. "That is because you have never entered it." He touched the surface lightly. The water expanded outward like a gateway opening. Suddenly, Harin was drawn into a vision. He saw himself standing in a vast, luminous space, a realm with no walls, no clocks, no boundaries. It radiated with infinite possibility, pulsing with soft gold light. "This," the man said beside him in the vision, "is the spacious now." Harin looked around in awe. "What is this place?" "It is the dimension where creation occurs," the man answered. "All timelines, all opportunities, all future selves arise from here." He gestured around them. "When you live in the future, you abandon the creative field. When you live in the past, you bind yourself to echoes. But when you live here, in the spacious now, you become a conscious creator." Harin stepped forward. The space responded, rippling gently like a living fabric. "It feels alive," he whispered. "Yes," the man said, "because the present is not a moment, it is a portal." Light swirled around Harin. "In the now, you are not thinking about reality, you are shaping it." The man raised his hand, and multiple versions of Harin appeared. Harin confident and joyful, Harin wildly successful, Harin in deep love, Harin at peace. Harin living his purpose. "These are not fantasies," the man said. "They are frequencies existing within the now." Harin reached toward one version, and the vision pulsed with recognition. "When you inhabit the present fully," the man continued, "you align with the version of yourself who already exists in potential form. And once aligned, reality collapses into that version." Harin felt tears sting his eyes. "So I've been missing my power by chasing the future?" "Yes," the man said, "the future is a mirage, but the now is infinite." The visions dissolved, and Harin found himself once again kneeling beside the pool. The man placed a hand over Harin's heart. "Return to this breath, this moment, at this presence. When you live here, life flows. When you leave here, life fragments." Harin inhaled slowly, feeling his awareness expand rather than contract. He felt spacious, grounded, alive in a way he had never experienced. The man whispered, "The present moment is not the smallest point in your life. It is the only point where your life exists." Harin closed his eyes and felt the truth vibrate through him like the first note of a new song. When he opened them, the man was gone. But the spacious now remained within him. From that day on, Harin no longer rushed toward the future. He lived inside the very moment that shaped all futures, and for the first time in his life, reality began to respond. Doors opened, ideas landed, people appeared, opportunities unfolded, because Harin was finally here, fully present, fully powerful, fully aligned with the field of creation. And he understood, the past binds, the future seduces, but the now creates. Chapter 21. The Frequency of Inevitable Success. High atop a mountain range where the sky seemed close enough to touch and the wind carried whispers from other worlds, there existed a sanctuary known only to those whose lives were on the brink of transformation. It was called the Hall of Resonance, a place where wise mystics gathered to study the hidden currents of success, not the human version born of effort, but the universal version born of vibrational certainty. To this sanctuary traveled a young man named Riven. He had lived all his life in a state of nearly successful, nearly fulfilled, nearly aligned. Every dream he pursued advanced just far enough to tease him, yet never fully materialized. Opportunities emerged like mirages, visible, alluring, but fading when approached. Riven believed he was cursed with a strange in-between fate, always caught one step away from breakthrough, but fate had brought him here to learn why. When Riven reached the Hall of Resonance, he found it suspended at the edge of a cliff, illuminated by an unseen source of light. Its pillars were carved not with symbols, but with vibrations, ripples frozen into stone. A tall mystic greeted him. She wore robes woven from threads of sunlight and moonlight that shimmered with a life of their own. "You seek success," she said gently, "but you have been vibrating at the frequency of possibility, not inevitability." Riven frowned. "What's the difference?" She motioned for him to follow her into the hall. Inside, the walls pulsed with soft light, breathing, alive, responding to the energy of those who stepped within. The floor was made of crystal slabs that glowed brighter when one walked with certainty and dimmer when one walked with doubt. Riven's steps flickered between the two. The mystic touched his shoulder. "You see," she said, "even your footsteps shift frequencies. Your energy is undecided. Until you decide, deeply, fully, success cannot stabilize." She led him to a circular chamber at the heart of the sanctuary. In its center floated a sphere of liquid light, swirling like a star-forming nebula. "This," she said, "is the sphere of inevitability." Riven stared in awe. "What does it do?" "It reveals the difference between desire and embodiment." She gestured toward the sphere. "Place your hand upon it." Riven did. Immediately, the sphere projected images around him, versions of his life where he succeeded magnificently and others where his dreams dissolved into dust. The visions shifted based on his internal state, as if reading the pulse of his belief. When he felt hopeful, the successful visions brightened. When he doubted, they dimmed and faded. When he feared failure, the sphere showed him timelines where his efforts collapsed. He gasped. "It changes with my emotions." The mystic nodded. "Success is not a reward, it is a frequency, and you have been oscillating constantly, sending mixed signals to the universe." Riven felt shame prick his heart. She raised a hand gently. "Do not be troubled. Most people vibrate at uncertainty. They want what they do not believe. They hope for what they fear is unlikely. They desire what they do not embody." She stepped closer until her presence enveloped him like warm light. "But there exists a frequency," she said softly, "where success is not desired, but inevitable." The chamber darkened except for the sphere, which now glowed with a deep golden resonance. "In this frequency," she continued, "your success is not a matter of if but when, not a possibility but a certainty. When you enter this state, reality must rearrange to match you, for you have aligned with the timeline where success already exists." Riven swallowed. "How do I enter that frequency?" She pointed to his chest. "By becoming the version of yourself for whom success is the only natural outcome. Not through effort, not through force, through identity." She pressed a finger gently to the sphere. Its golden light expanded, engulfing Riven. Suddenly he felt himself lifted into a vast, spacious awareness. He saw a version of himself who moved through life with quiet confidence. A version who no longer hoped success would come, but assumed it. A version whose energy was steady, grounded, unshakable. A version who acted not from fear of loss, but from knowing what was his. This Riven did not strive. He expected. He didn't chase opportunities. They gravitated toward him. He didn't question if doors would open. He walked, knowing they already had. Riven felt this identity seep into his being, warm, magnetic, expansive. The mystic's voice echoed in the golden haze. "Let go of desire. Transform it into inevitability. Let go of hoping. Replace it with knowing. Let go of chasing. Become the one who is chosen." The golden light pulsed rhythmically, syncing with his heart. "Inevitable success is not arrogance," she said. "It is resonance. It is alignment. It is truth." The sphere dimmed and Riven returned to the chamber floor, breathless and transformed. The mystic met his gaze. "From this day forward, walk not as someone seeking success, but as someone success cannot avoid." He felt the power of those words vibrate through him like sacred chords. As he descended the mountain, the world felt different. Not because it had changed, but because he had. Inside him, a quiet certainty took root. Not hope, not excitement, not desire, but inevitability. And the universe, sensing the shift, began rearranging itself accordingly. Chapter 22. The Final Dissolution. Far beyond the familiar world, past the last shimmering edges of ordinary perception, there existed a place known only as the Chamber of Completion. It was said that those who reached this chamber did not come to manifest more, but to release the final illusions that kept them tethered to an outdated reality. This was where transformation completed itself, where the old self made its final bow, where the past dissolved like mist at sunrise. And this was where Ilara now found herself. Ilara had journeyed through every realm of inner transformation: awareness,
identity, frequency, surrender. Yet something still clung to her spirit, like the faint outline of an old shadow, a residue of who she had been, a whisper of who she no longer wished to be, a lingering illusion that distorted her perception just enough to create doubt. She felt ready, yet unfinished, awakened, yet incomplete. The chamber of completion shimmered before her like a cathedral carved from moonlight and memory. Within it, a single doorway pulsed with soft white radiance. As Elara stepped across the threshold, the doorway sealed behind her with a sound like the closing of a great book. The chamber was silent, so silent she could hear her heartbeat echo in the stillness. In the center stood a mirror taller than any she had seen, its frame woven from strands of starlight. This mirror did not reflect bodies. It reflected identities. Elara approached with hesitant breath. The surface rippled, revealing a series of images, past versions of herself. Elara the pleaser, Elara the dreamer, Elara the doubter, Elara the invisible, Elara the fearful, Elara the wounded, Elara the searching. Each version stepped forward from the mirror as though alive, encircling her. They were not threatening, just present, waiting, observing. A voice rose from the chamber walls. Everything you fear still exists only because you have not stopped identifying with the self who fears. Elara trembled. The voice continued. You believe you have changed, but belief is not dissolution. For dissolution, you must let the old self die. Her breath caught. Die? Yes, the voice echoed. A truth cannot be born where an illusion still clings. The mirror shimmered again. A final version appeared, one she recognized instantly. Elara the almost transformed. This version looked like her, felt like her, yet carried a faint tension, one thread of unresolved fear, one fragment of old identity, a nearly perfect reflection, but incomplete. The chamber grew brighter, illuminating the versions around her. You cannot step into your new timeline, said the voice, while carrying fragments of the person who created the old one. Elara felt the words strike with the force of cosmic honesty. She had shed layers, yes. She had shifted identity, yes. But part of her still feared fully dissolving the familiar self. The one shaped by past pain, old stories, inherited beliefs. Stop clinging, the voice whispered. Elara, let her go. Elara closed her eyes and felt every version of herself surrounding her, not as burdens, but as echoes. They represented stories she had outgrown, identities she no longer aligned with, vibrations that no longer matched her soul's expansion. Finally, she whispered, I release you. All of you. The moment the words left her lips, the chamber responded. The versions of herself dissolved into beams of light. The old identities unraveled like threads pulled from worn fabric. The mirror cracked, not in violence, but in liberation. Its pieces fell away, revealing an infinite emptiness behind it. A vast, open void, silent, unbounded, pure. The voice spoke gently. This is who you truly are before you become anything. Creation begins here. Elara stepped into the void. Light enveloped her, not blinding but welcoming, warm, loving. It filled every corner of her being, washing away the residue of her past. A new awareness bloomed. Her desires were not ahead of her. They were expressions of her essence. Her manifestations were not distant. They were extensions of her identity. Her fears had no power. They were remnants of selves she no longer inhabited. She felt her consciousness expand beyond her body, beyond her name, beyond everything she had believed herself to be. Then the voice spoke one final truth. Transformation is not becoming more. It is becoming less. Less of who you never were, so you may remember who you've always been. Elara exhaled, long and steady. When she stepped out of the chamber, the world felt new. Not because it had changed, but because she had. Her old reality no longer had a reference point in her being. It could not find her. It could not follow her. It could not recreate itself. She had dissolved the self who matched it. And in that dissolution, her new timeline crystallized. She walked forward, light, whole, unbound. The universe bowed in recognition.